A 3-year-old girl was found face down in the mud, eyes open, not moving. Her body was so cold that the paramedics couldn't get a temperature reading on their equipment. And her mother was sitting just a few feet away, wide awake, the entire night. She knew it was freezing. She knew both of her kids were sick. She had a phone with battery. She had people she could call. And for 11 hours, she did absolutely nothing. This is the story of Alina Ridge, 3 years old, and the chain of choices that took her life one by one. January 2024, Douglas County, Georgia. A winter storm warning was already in effect. Temperatures had dropped to around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That's well below freezing, the kind of cold that soaks through your clothes within minutes and starts doing real damage fast. Yuria Ridge was 35 years old, and on paper, just a few weeks before all of this, she looked like someone holding her life together. She worked as an office manager. She had responsibilities, a routine. People who knew her said she seemed completely functional. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. Her own parents later told investigators that the decline happened suddenly. Within just 3 weeks, she went from running an entire office to not being able to get her kids to school on time, leaving the stove on with grease burning, making threats, becoming paranoid and unpredictable. And right in the middle of all of it were her 2 children, 7-year-old Isaiah and 3-year-old Alina. At the time, the family had been staying at her parents' home, but the situation there had become dangerous. Police were called out to the house on January 13th, then again on January 14th. There were reports of fire threats, erratic behavior, and at one point Yuria tried to break into a lockbox, the one her father kept a gun in. Her parents were scared. They were asking for help. Then, on January 14th, Yuria packed up both kids and checked into Foxhall Resort, a luxury property outside Atlanta. She booked 10 nights, over $3,000. And I keep coming back to that detail. 10 nights. That's not a vacation. That feels like someone trying to disappear or run from something, and it makes everything that followed that much more difficult to understand. The following night, January 15th, things got much worse. Late that evening, Yuria and the kids were picked up by an Uber near her workplace. Both Isaiah and Alina had recently been sick with the flu, already weak, already exhausted before any of this started. During the ride, the Uber driver noticed something alarming. According to investigators, Yuria was using cocaine openly in the back seat. The driver was uncomfortable. He kept going, following her directions, until the road narrowed and he couldn't continue. She told him to stop. It was 12:07 in the morning. Dark, cold, rain starting to come down. And that's where the night began. Yuria got out of the car with both children. And instead of walking toward the lights, toward the road, toward the hotel she'd been staying at, she went the other way, into the woods. Investigators would later point out something important. Even in the darkest parts of the Foxhall Resort property, streetlights and buildings were never very far away. Help was reachable. Warmth existed. She walked away from all of it. The 3 of them eventually settled under a tree, outside, in below-freezing temperatures, with rain soaking through everything they had on. And what really gets me is how Isaiah described it later. This 7-year-old boy, talking to investigators, said it completely calmly. It was way past our bedtime, so we found a tree and went to sleep. 7 years old, saying it like it was just another night. Alina was wearing a Mickey Mouse hoodie. That was it. No coat. No real protection from 20-degree weather and pouring rain. Hours passed. The rain soaked through their clothes. The cold got worse. And by morning, Alina had stopped responding. But even then, the 911 call didn't come right away. Yuria finally called for help at 11:46 in the morning, nearly 11 hours after they stepped out of that Uber. She later admitted she had been awake most of the night. Her phone had battery. She knew people she could reach, and still she waited 11 hours. When first responders finally arrived, the scene was devastating. Isaiah was standing nearby with his hands buried in his pockets. Yuria was curled up on the ground in a fetal position. and Alina was lying face down in the mud, silent, eyes open and fixed. One of the medics said something afterward that stuck with everyone on scene. "It's by far the coldest person I've ever touched." Isaiah's body temperature had dropped to 93.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Dangerously low, but survivable. Alina's temperature was so low that the thermometer couldn't register a reading at all. At the hospital, doctors worked for over an hour and 40 minutes trying to bring her back. At 2:45 that afternoon, Alina Ridge was pronounced dead. 3 years old. When detectives sat down with Yuria later, something felt off. Not just grief, not just shock. There was a strange detachment to the way she talked about that night. Her timeline kept shifting. Details changed. And at one point, she told investigators that a small wild cat had climbed into her pocket during the night and slept there. And that when morning came, it said goodbye and walked away. She described it almost like a camping story, like she was recalling some strange adventure, not the night her daughter died. Honestly, that disconnect is the part that stays with me the most about this case. Because throughout the interview, it often felt less like a grieving mother, and more like someone describing an unfortunate inconvenience. The detective eventually asked her directly, "Do you think your actions caused your daughter's death?" After a pause, Yuria said yes. But the way she said it, it barely seemed to land. Toxicology confirmed cocaine in her system. Marijuana was also found in the woods, in her clothing. She told investigators she had eaten some of it that night because she didn't have a lighter. Both children had been sick going into that night. Alina especially. Yuria knew that. And then investigators found something else. 6 years earlier, December 2018, Yuria had been babysitting a friend's 7-month-old baby when that child suddenly died in her care. The death was ruled SIDS. No charges were ever filed. But the baby's mother told investigators something quietly devastating. They said it wasn't her fault. She don't care. 2 tragedies. One person connected to both. Now, I want to be clear. There's no evidence that the 2018 death involved anything other than what it was ruled to be. The case was closed. But when you look at the full picture, the drug use, the escalating behavior, the pattern of instability, it becomes hard not to think about how many warning signs were already there, long before January 2024, including a 2022 incident at a bowling alley, where Yuria, reportedly blackout drunk, slapped Isaiah across the face, dragged him by the neck, and dropped Alina. Charges from that incident were still pending when Alina died. And that's the part of this case that genuinely frustrates me. Police had been called to the house on the 13th. On the 14th, officers smelled marijuana and called it seasonings. Her parents were actively asking for help. The people around her knew something was seriously wrong. But nothing moved fast enough. In October 2024, Yuria Ridge pled guilty to murder, felony cruelty to children, and cocaine possession, charges stemming from both the night in the woods and the 2022 bowling alley incident. She was sentenced to life in prison. Isaiah was placed with his grandparents while his father pursued permanent custody. That little boy stood in the freezing woods all night with his hands in his pockets, watching over his sister, trying to survive something no child should ever have to survive. He deserved so much better. And so did Alina. Cases like this one don't leave you quickly, because there's no mystery here, no unknown suspect, just a long chain of decisions, missed chances, and a 3-year-old little girl who was completely dependent on the one person who was supposed to protect her. And I keep thinking about how many moments existed that night, and in the days before it, where this could have ended differently.